पानी पियो, पानी पियो।
मुझे मार डालो। उसने बोला कि ये शायद मुस्लिम नहीं है, उसने उसको गोली मारी। मेरे पति का बच्चा लो।
India will identify, track and punish every terrorist and their backers.
The massacre of 26 innocent civilians, mostly tourists, in Kashmir's Pahalgam has jolted the collective conscience of the world. It is a tragic reminder of the constant threat of terrorism. The gut-wrenching reports of the attackers identifying victims by religion, that too before executing them at close range, marks a new low in the history of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. Global condemnation has been quick to follow, from US President Donald Trump to Russian President Vladimir Putin, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Also, nearly all of Europe have stood in solidarity with India. The support received by India also includes New Delhi's Quad partners, Australia and Japan. In fact, Islamabad's ally Beijing has also joined the chorus, underscoring China's opposition to all forms of terrorism. Many have probed the larger meaning of this global condemnation, even labeling it as mere lip service. But before we get into the messages largely shared on X, I want to draw your attention to how Pakistan has isolated itself on the global stage. The timing of the Baisaran attack is no coincidence. The fact that it comes in the wake of 2611 accused the Havurana's extradition from the US. Moreover, the Pakistan Army Chief General Asim Munir's anti-India tirade from last week that described Kashmir as Pakistan's jugular vein is a reference largely being seen as General Munir's prologue to the April 22nd bloodbath in Kashmir. In fact, one wonders the logic behind Munir's attempt to rake up the two-nation theory, that too more than 7 decades after the independence of India and Pakistan. This, as the Baloch insurgency is already giving General Asim Munir sleepless nights. All of this combined with US Vice President J.D. Vance's India visit make it obvious that forces behind these terrorists have thrown down the gauntlet at the government of India. Whether it's the West or the larger Muslim world, Islamabad finds itself increasingly isolated. The terror incidents in Uri and Pulwama have already laid a precedent for India's fierce cross-border retaliation. Will the massacre in the meadows of Baisaran trigger a similar enough is enough response? After all, the Modi government prides itself on its muscularity, but is also under intense pressure to teach Pakistan a lesson all over again. The Prime Minister has already sounded the war cry in Bihar by referring to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. On the diplomatic front, it's a big opportunity for New Delhi to name and shame Islamabad in the international arena. Rana's interrogation is expected to reaffirm India's consistent stand that Pakistan is an incorrigible epicenter of terrorism. The outcome of the Pahalgam probe will lend even greater weightage to Delhi's argument. But the moot point is when or whether Pakistan will see the error of its destructive ways. Moreover, India's revocation of Pak visas and suspension of the Indus Water Treaty has already marked the beginning of New Delhi's diplomatic strike. Clearly, Islamabad is desperate for global attention to distract from its own domestic failures. It wants Washington, Beijing and even Arab states to get involved. Remember, at the time of the attack, Prime Minister Modi was in Jeddah, the headquarters of the OIC or Organization of Islamic Cooperation. In the Saudi Arabia-India joint statement, Riyadh and New Delhi, both sides have stressed the importance of strengthening security cooperation in the field of combating terrorism and its financing. And so, Saudi Arabia's support to India is not merely a symbolic gesture. On many fronts, it is a clear signal that a key player in the Muslim world is moving away from the old rhetoric and aligning more firmly with global norms on counter-terrorism. Remember, for Gulf nations in today's geopolitical calculus, the Middle East is increasingly being guided by strategic, security and global priorities, replacing its emphasis on religious or ideological affiliations of yesteryears. Also, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is a new generation reformer seen strongly against fundamentalist ideology. Unfortunately for Pakistan, the country is in dire straits. Sample this. For years, Pakistan was a key partner to the United States in Afghanistan. There could neither be war nor peace in Afghanistan without Islamabad's support. With Washington pulling out of Kabul in 2021, the leverage that Pakistan enjoyed with the Americans is mostly gone. And as it faces a crippling economic crisis, the US has not stepped in to bail Pakistan out as it had repeatedly done in the past. The Taliban regime in Kabul has not been the client state Pakistan had hoped it would be. Instead, it has turned rather hostile. Regions bordering Afghanistan have witnessed a spate of attacks on both civilians and military personnel. Apart from the Gulf states distancing themselves from Pakistan, China has seemingly grown impatient with Pakistan. Beijing has poured in billions of dollars to develop infrastructure in Pakistan as part of its flagship Belt and Road initiative. But many of China's projects in Pakistan remain stalled today. What's noteworthy is that Chinese nationals involved in BRI have been killed, compelling China to deploy its own private security personnel. Although China remains Pakistan's biggest patron, the bilateral relationship between the two countries is not what it used to be, even in the very recent past. Moreover, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor has huge potential. China-led BRI that goes through Pakistan is now viewing this as a threat. Therefore, can New Delhi urge Gulf states to financially cut off Pakistan? And here's why. General Asim Munir needs to be more worried about his own province than India's Kashmir, because Pakistan's border with Iran has not been much better. Just last week, 8 Pakistani migrant workers were shot dead in Iran's Sistan Balochistan province by a Baloch militant outfit. Last year, both countries targeted alleged terrorist sanctuaries on the other side of the border with missile strikes. To add to this, the hijacking of Jafar Express by Baloch insurgents had already grabbed international headlines last month. Not surprising why many foreign policy analysts say that Pakistan's border with India was its most peaceful compared to its western neighbors. And before I end, here's a reminder of how Pakistan was placed on the FATF's grey list for money laundering and terror financing. Pakistan was taken off the list in 2022 after Pahalgam. New Delhi and Washington must work together to have Islamabad back on the list and restart FATF scrutiny. After all, it was during Donald Trump's previous presidency that Pakistan was placed on FATF's grey list. Plus, there are many Republicans calling out Pakistan's deep state for providing a safe haven to terror organizations. New Delhi must work with them to pursue sanctions against Pakistani military elements that support terrorism.